The USS Constitution. Why do you have I need those. Yes.
Chad plays the leading role this period. You
Yes.
can play the leading role next period.
Yes. USS Constitution. That's it right there. Yes. That's it. It's great. It's I think no, I don't want to watch that. Yes, it's 44 gun frigate, but typically carried 54 guns. It was 53 meters long at the waterline, 13 meters wide at the waterline, and 7 meters below the water, which it was actually very, very deep for frigates of the time, and 13 knots or 24 kilometers per hour, which actually matched the Great Britain's Leda class frigates at the time. Typically carried 450 sailors, or including 55 Marines and 30 boys. And this is in contrast to the Leda class frigate, which was rated as a 38 gun frigate. Some of them carried up to like 42, 47, but none of them ever matched the USS Constitution in armament. 45 meters below, or 45 meters of length at the deck, which is actually means that it was actually a whole lot shorter than the Constitution, because the Constitution went up to, I think, around 60 meters at the deck. But 12 meters at waterline, which is only 1 meter shorter or thinner than the USS Constitution. And actually about half the draft or area below the waterline, but still the same speed, because the USS Constitution had a ton of sails. And it complemented 250 to 300. Yeah. Some of them went up to around 350.
The USS Constitution, it was so deep in the water that when they tried to launch it after they initially built it, they had to relaunch it twice to get it to successfly go through into the harbor.
Because its bottom was scraping the dry dock. How do I go back? There we go. Yes. Yes. You want the video? Okay. You can watch that then.
USS Constitution was launched in 1797 to protect American shipping. The ship was constructed of sturdy live oak, white oak, red cedar, and pitch pine. She is 207 feet from billet head to taffrail and 43.5 feet at her widest section. She was designed to carry 44 guns, but almost always carried more. In the War of 1812, Constitution was one of only a few U.S. Navy frigates, but was also of larger than average size, allowing her to carry more and heavier guns than her adversaries. In August 1812, Constitution met the British warship HMS Guerriere in the Atlantic. Captain Isaac Hull, in command of Constitution, brought his ship within 25 yards of Guerriere, blasting the enemy at point-blank range.
Okay then. Now what would you want to do first? Okay. What are you doing? USS Constitution, construction of it, as I went over the measurements here, it was built because of the Barbary War, the first Barbary War, correctly, around, it was commissioned in 1794 because the U.S. Navy was actually very small. I think it was 3 gunboats at the time, and they couldn't do anything to stop the piracy from the Tripoli and the Algiers. So they commissioned 6 frigates under the Naval Act of 1794, but only 3 of them were actually continued production after the peace was signed for with the Algiers, I guess, the Barbary War. The USS Constitution, I think the USS Constellation, and the USS United States were the only ones actually continued production after the peace was signed. One of the reasons it was successful was that its hull was almost half a meter thick of three layers of planks. Each one was about 7 inches thick, and each layer was pointing in a different direction. So to penetrate, you'd have to go through 3 layers, and every penetration on a plank would have to break against the next one in a direction against the grain. So it got a ton of extra durability for about the same, well, actually it cost a lot more as well, but about half a meter thicker on both sides, or half a meter thick on both sides. But this is how it actually bounced cannonballs and prevented penetration entirely in several battles.
And earned the nickname Old Ironside in the Battle with Guerriere.
Yes. Yes. And then in the, oh, why did you add so much? The French Quasi-War, they didn't actually do much. It captured one ship and recaptured another. The one ship it did capture, it had to return because it was taken out of a neutral port. So it didn't really do anything.
You don't have to include every single slide. The 2 presentations can be somewhat different. That's fine.
Yeah. And then in the First Barbary War, about the same thing happened. The USS Constitution was there, but didn't really have a significant role. It bombarded the city of Tripoli in an effort to force them to surrender, and also fought against the navy of the Barbary states. But other than that, nothing really happened. Its first major involvement was in the War of 1812 in the Constitution versus the Guerriere. I put the stats down here as well. It was a 38-gun frigate, a whole lot shorter than the USS Constitution, thinner than the USS Constitution. Didn't go as deep as the USS Constitution. Had 100 less people manning it. So it was a very lopsided battle from the start, and without even taking into consideration a much thinner hull, because it was French built. I couldn't find anything on the speed, but I assume it was. I assume that doesn't matter because they're actually fighting. The Constitution easily defeated the Guerriere and had 14 casualties to the Guerriere's 93. Very, very lopsided. But because it was a victory, it did help the morale of soldiers and just America's population all over the place. But like he said, because we lost that fort, and then we also had a victory with this. Although when you actually look at the both sides, it's not very surprising for a victory. It just shows that the American frigates were actually competent in battle. And then Jacob has an activity. Yes. I don't know what.
Are you using that for your presentation?
He has cardboard boxes, so I think
Do you want this to be part of yours or just his?
I think this is part of both of ours.
Okay,
We're doing
bring 'em in.
twice.
Let's go. Everybody, come on.
I guess we're going outside.
Out in the hallway.
Okay. Yeah.
Come on. Got a minute time.
How many people?
Like, so it's
16.
Jamie, go that way.
Or that's the USS Constitution.
Yes. How about 10 people over there?
Alright,
We're just watching.
we're good. Start it.
Who wants to volunteer to be in the box? Okay, so.
This is retarded. Say hello to the camera. Yeah.
Remember all year is people in a box. Alright.
This is.
I can't get however many you get.
That sounds right.
Hustle, Bobby. Going on here.
What?
No, because there were twice as many crew members in the USS Constitution.
Nobody, Jake, it's always late.
A third of us over here. Is that why I can throw? Yeah, you guys can hold extra balls to get me.
All right.
Okay.
What's the next step, gentlemen?
You want to push it straight out so Eduardo can throw or something?
Okay.
Listen up.
So next, it's time to engage the naval battle. Like Eddie, do you want to push the ball?
Uh-oh. I have balls dropping in the box.
And
Oh, gee.
Fire! You get 3 points if you get it in the Constitution.
Oh my god.
Dad, we need to go back to the classroom. We're gonna finish up.
okay, wait, stop. I think the USS Constitution won the battle.
All right, back to your seats.
Yay.
Okay, where'd the bucket go? We need the bucket back.
Chad, you come back and teach. Jacob, you clean up.
Yes, I'm gonna get out.
Yeah. He's like, okay, so I'm going to explain the rules, and then you're just like,
All right, so the Constitution and the guerriere have fought, and the Constitution sides are men of iron, although you've explained they're not. So where do we go from there?
Yes. It was quite exciting. Not even at all, but because it was a victory, it was a great morale boost. Now later in 1812, the Constitution confronted the HMS Java, which is another frigate, but this time it's a 40-gun frigate that carried 49. So a little bit more even, but still a whole lot smaller, but still same amount of thinness, and it's another French-built frigate, if I remember correctly. Very light, meant for speed rather than heaviness or armor or anything. But this time it has a complement of 475. I think it was carrying troops at the time. And so it was a whole lot more even in most of the ways. But still, the HMS Java was destroyed to the point it had to be burned at the end of the battle, with 122 casualties to the Constitution's 66. Actually, something I didn't mention with the Constitution versus Guerriere, this is the battle that they got the Ironsides name, because several 32-pound balls, if I remember correctly, just bounced off entirely.
None of them ever pierced through.
Okay, and then this one, it was even, but very, very lopsided results. The Constitution lost the helm. Somehow a cannonball went all the way onto the deck and removed essentially the steering wheel for the ship. So for the entire battle they had to drive manually. And the Java just lost everything. Its masts fell off and everything. So when the officer, the captain, later was court-martialed, I think, or was it the Guerriere? These notes are not helpful.
Just
Oh,
go,
yes.
just go with what you know and move on.
Got it. Well, the Java had a lot of stuff collapse to the point where it's completely useless, because normally in war, if something's captured, they take it back to port to sell it. And this time there wasn't anything to sell. Just like with the Guerriere, the Constitution destroys anything it attacks. Under 22 casualties to 66, not even there. And this was a great victory as well. The Constitution came back to port with an even greater hero's welcome than the initial one coming back from the Guerriere. And then, moving on, the HMS Scion and the HMS Levant. In early 1815, they fought. There was 2 boats versus 1, but they were actually much, much smaller, very lightly armed, very few people. So it was again, the Constitution is picking on things much less than its own size.
Chad, you can tell us about the implications of all these battles
Yes.
tomorrow?
Oh, now or tomorrow?
They're doing it tomorrow, but.
Okay. I can do that tomorrow.
All right,
Yeah.
thank you.